does it mean? What should it look like to be salt and light for the common good? So like I said, I think that this phrase gets overused a bit because we see salt and light everywhere, but we don't spend a lot of time as Christians, in my opinion, actually defining it and then applying it. So that's what I want to do a little bit of right now. Just to make sure we're all on the same page as to where this comes from, the phrase salt and light comes from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5. We're not going to read the whole passage, but just a couple of the relevant parts here. And he tells his followers, "You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. Let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." So salt is a preservative. When Jesus is saying you're the salt of the earth, he's literally telling his followers, you are the preservers of the world. We are preserving the world through practicing righteousness for as long as God wants to work out his purposes. And when we're being light, like we just talked about, we are exposing the darkness. We are exposing the works of evil. Ephesians 5 says, take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. So this is our role, to be salt and light preservers and exposers. So let me point out something that I really hope is obvious, but it doesn't seem to be obvious a lot of times for Christians, that being salt and light, preserving and exposing, these are activities that are inherently of a public nature. Can we all see that? You are not preserving and exposing anything by sitting in your living room. These activities require us to engage with other people. And yet a lot of Christians will say, well, my faith's just private. You know, I believe in Jesus, I have a really good, strong faith, but that's just between me and Jesus. Well, if that's your faith, Jesus would have something to say about that because he wants to call you to more. He wants to call you to actually making an impact in the world for him, for being salt and being light. Now, other Christians will take it a step further and they'll say, oh, I totally agree. We are not just supposed to sit in our living rooms, but we just need to stick to sharing the gospel. We don't need to get involved with all this common good stuff or getting out there and making social change. Well, I address a lot of these kinds of objections in my book, When Culture Hates You, and we don't have time to get into all of those, but suffice it to say that being salt and light absolutely involves sharing the gospel. That is absolutely part of being salt and light in this world. There can be no greater salt and light than actually bringing more people into the light. Absolutely. That's the Great Commission. But that's not all that we are called to do. When we are salt and light, ultimately, we are loving God and we are loving others. And when we talk about advocating for the righteous functioning of society, we're actually just talking about one way that we love other people. So when you love God and love others, the two greatest commandments, part of that is loving people and caring about them and the quality of their lives in the context of the societies in which they live. And sometimes people still struggle with that because they're thinking, well, I don't know how much we should do of that. Let me just give you a really blunt force example. If suddenly you went home and you found out that the government was cutting the heads off of your neighbors indiscriminately, do you think as a Christian it should be your role to speak up and say something about what the governing structure is doing? Yes, of course. Of course, I don't think any Christian would intuitively say, no, I think I should stick to, the house. I'm going to go hide. I think we all know, despite what we might actually have the courage to do, I think we all know, of course we should say something. Of course it matters how the government treats people. So the simplest explanation I can give for why we want to advocate for the righteous functioning of society, for the common good, is that it's part of how we love others. It's not everything about how we love others. We love others in all kinds of ways. We're salt and light in all kinds of ways. But for our purposes here, we're talking about what that looks like when it comes to the common good specifically. So this is where it gets a little bit more complicated because people will use the common good phrase in a lot of ways. How do you actually define that? What if one person says, well, I think this is for the common good, and someone else says this is for the common good? I mean, ultimately, that's what culture wars are about. I really hate the term culture war because it sounds like something bad. It's not actually that bad. Culture war just means that we live in a constitutional republic where everyone can vie for their views in the public square. And you know what happens in a culture war? You have a group of people over here who are saying, I want what's best for society. And another group of people over here who are saying, I want what's best for society. See, you usually don't have people who are saying, I want what's best for society and I want what's worst. It's just different people who are defining what's best differently. Different people will think of the common good in different ways. So as Christians, it is our responsibility to understand with great clarity what the common good actually is according to God's standards. See, good requires definition. And if we're not actually defining it in a way that's consistent with how God defines it, then we're not doing our job as salt and light. So let's take a few minutes to dig into the common good and what that would look like. I want you to picture that you go into a kindergarten classroom and you tell them this. Okay, guys, I'm coming back in 1 hour, and here's your assignment. You need to come up with 3 rules, and these are the rules that you're going to abide by in this classroom for the rest of the school year. The only framework that I'm giving you is to say that they have to be for your common good. They have to be for everyone's good. You can't come up with rules that are only good for one person and not another. So, got to be for everybody's good. I'll be back in an hour. Okay. If you've ever been around kids, if you have your own kids or know anything about kids, you would not be surprised if you came back to this kindergarten classroom and these were the 3 rules that they had come up with for their common good. Number 1, cookies will be served for every meal. Number 2, cartoons are going to replace your classroom instruction. And number 3, no one will ever be asked to pick up their own toys. These are the kinds of rules that kids would come up with, and they would actually think they're good rules. They would define good according to their knowledge and their experience and their feelings about the things that they want. But as adults, we have a different understanding, right? We know that objectively, no matter how those kids might feel, these are not good rules, according to any objective standard, right? If you have cookies every day for all of your meals, you're going to be really unhealthy. So that is objectively bad for your body. If you're watching all cartoons, that's objectively bad for your mind. You're not getting an education. And if there are toys lying around, everyone suffers, because if you've ever stepped on a Lego, you know that that is true suffering. So these are not actually for good. Well, you might think, okay, but that's because of knowledge and experience. But if adults grow up and we all gain knowledge and experience, then why are we still defining the good so differently? Well, the reason for that is that good and how you define good is a product of your worldview. And worldviews are very complex things. So if you're not familiar with that term, a worldview is basically the lens through which you see reality. So it's how you answer the big questions about life. Where did we come from? Why are we here? Is there an objective purpose? What happens after you die? Is there a God, for example? When you answer all those questions, you have answers to them. It forms that lens, and that's how you see all of reality. So that's what a worldview is, and everyone has a worldview, whether they've ever heard that term or they have consciously arrived at it or not. Everyone has a worldview. How you define good is dependent on how you see the whole world. It's dependent on how you see the nature of reality.